BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, NBA, NHL, and much more. Head to BetOnline today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline. The game starts here.
This shit feel like ain't 7. Put lines on through my ass. Wake up in the morning, count my blessings. Feel like heaven. This shit feel like ain't 7.
Welcome to the Money Down, the Believe Network, presented by BetOnline.ag. We have Heat sideline reporter Jimmy Taché kicking it with us. As you can see, we have some Heat fans, 2 Heat fans in here, me and Soj. And on the other hand, we have a Bull fan.
Bull!
He's not wearing a Bulls hat because we know they're not very good. So
he knew not to do that while I was on.
No. Hey, let me go get my D Rose jersey real quick.
You want to go get your Jimmy Butler one as well? Or?
I get that too. I got Mike on standby too. Which one you want?
No, I got to respect that. Jeremy, when we have guests on, we like to go back to the beginning. So take me back to Cypress Bay, maybe even the UCF days. What got you into the sports broadcasting world?
Man, it's a great question and a fun journey to go through. First of all, thank you guys for having me. James, you definitely won't remember this, but while I was at UCF, a friend of mine named Justin had a sports radio show, and he was all nervous about this big interview that he had coming up, and it was with you. And so he was like, Jeremy, will you help me? Will you come be like the co-host of that episode? And I was like, oh my God, James White, absolutely, dude. He's amazing. And he's from South Florida. I can't wait for this. So we interviewed you. God, I mean, that was probably 2015, 2016, years and years and years ago, while I was in school. And it was like the highlight of my month, week, year, whatever. And it was awesome. So it's so cool to be here with you.
Full circle.
Yeah, man. Very full circle. But yeah, I mean, look, I was a kid that I grew up playing baseball. I played pretty competitively. I played at Cypress Bay. It was an all-county pitcher, but I was a 5'9" Jewish kid, and so that ended right there. And so it was never going beyond that. And I knew that. And so since I also did a little bit of theater stuff, like acting and singing and whatever, I was like, okay, how do I find a way to mix my love of performing with my love of sports? And broadcast journalism made a ton of sense to me. Because I was like, oh, cool. I can, be in front of a camera doing that type of thing, talking about sports, and find a way to, create a hybrid there. And so, I did the high school newspaper thing. And, while our high school football team, while I was in high school, went to a state championship. It was Matt Days and Tay Lewis.
What year was that? Because I think I played against Matt Days.
We all graduated 2013.
Okay, we the same age.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So it was amazing. And it was so great to have an opportunity to cover a group of guys. Danny Isadora was an offensive lineman there. And, these guys who were great. Alex Montgomery, God, he was amazing. And it was a really great group of guys to get to cover as well. They were just really great to hang out with off the field, and it made me realize this is something I would love to do, even if I don't get to play baseball beyond high school. And so I went off to UCF totally unsure about what their broadcast program was like. It wasn't really developed when I got there. It's a much different thing now than it was when I got to school. Yeah. And, I took my classes, I found my things. I interned at a couple of different venues, including there was a summer collegiate baseball league that I interned with, where I was there, I was solo in the broadcast booth by myself. And I would do these 4-hour long wood bat baseball games with a bunch of D2 guys that were going to be lucky if they ended up, maybe they'd get to the minor leagues. Yeah. And I knew I was broadcasting it was an internet broadcast that was almost definitely only being heard by all their parents, and But for me, I was like, I get to talk about baseball for 4 hours. This is awesome. And I was lucky enough to just kind of get some experiences like that. And the one that really changed everything for me was landing on the right desk at the right time and landing an internship with Around the Horn with ESPN. And it was like,
I used to watch that all the time.
Like the best, like Tony Reali. That's if we really want to go back, like when I'm like 10 years old and I'm watching Around the Horn, I'm like, that's it. Like, that's what I want to do. Like, that guy seems to have the best life. You know, it's the coolest show. All these people are so smart around him, and all he has to do is just get it out of him. Like, that sounds like so much fun. And to then be able to, you know, like a decade later or so, land an internship with them. And when I say right place, right time, like, no joke, I came to find out later on that it was between me and like 2 or 3 other people who were finalists for the internship position. And the guy who was deciding, who's gone, like now we're friends, but who was deciding between the resumes, brought him up to a woman who I think at the time was working as Mike Wilbon's assistant, because PTI and Around the Horn are produced out of the same studio. It was like, hey, I can't decide of these people, who would you choose? And she was like, oh, he put that he plays music on his resume. That's gutsy. Choose that guy. And that's how I got the internship. Like, it's just that lucky awesome. That it was the right person. And if not, maybe somebody else chooses somebody else and it all goes a different way. But that really gave me a lot of confidence. And so going into my senior year of college, we had this student-run TV show called Hitting the Field that really was dying. Like, everybody who was on it were seniors who were like going out the door and they weren't sure what they were going to do with it. And I got this phone call like a week before I was going back to school that said, hey, would you be interested in being the executive producer of the show? And I was like, yeah, God, I would love that. But also, you don't have a host. I want to host too. And so I basically stepped in. It was me and like 3 of my buddies. And we were like, all right, we've got like a month to build a full staff of a show that can put on this live show. And so it was like every day I was in a different journalism class around the school, like, hey, come join us. You're not getting any internship credit or anything like that, but like we get to make a show. Like, that's so cool, right? And so somehow that started in September. By Halloween, we had a full staff of like 35 kids that had now gone and shadowed some of the other shows, built this thing up. And that was like the first moment where I realized, like, okay, maybe this is something I can legitimately do. So it's been a lot of, it's really just been about like having a passion for sports, loving sports, and feeling now like, you know, being close to a decade into doing this professionally, like just feeling lucky to be able to tell people stories. You know, like there's nothing cooler than, you know, even the small things. Like, I have a story that I want to tell that I haven't gotten to yet on the Heat games of, like, Terry Rozier has this sandwich that he's been making since he's a little kid that's spaghetti, sugar, and ranch. And it sounds like the most,
whoa.
It's the most amazing thing at the same time, right?
Sounds delicious.
It sounds
just alley.
No, that sounds delicious.
But right, like, but even that, like, the origins of it come from when he was a kid, and it was like that was what he had around the house, and he made it one time, and he was like, oh, this is great. And so there's just the little human stories that exist within the game. And as someone who, you know, I just mentioned, right, like, covered our high school football team and got to know those guys and played high school baseball myself, I really, really, really enjoy like the humanity that exists within sports. And that's something I've now been lucky enough to get to like be a part of for years professionally.
And can you talk about the work ethic that goes into that, you know, starting, you know, high school, you know, college, not getting paid to do these things. So, you know, what made you stick with it that entire time?
Yeah, it's a great question, because it would have been a lot more sane to not stick with it. Yeah. I think a combination of things. I got to start with the fact that I'm lucky. Like, when I graduated, I got to move back home and live with my parents who could support me emotionally and financially. And if that wasn't the case, I'm probably not sitting here doing all of this stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's important to like acknowledge that when it comes to anything, because man, I have so many friends who are equally as talented, equally as hard workers, who just didn't get to keep doing this because they had to give up earlier. Because whether it was financially or emotionally, they just, couldn't make it happen. When it comes to the work stuff, like, I think it does come from having been a baseball player, where it's like it's the old proverbial, like, you fail 70% of the time and you're a Hall of Famer. Yeah. And so I got used to failure. I got used to rejection. And man, that same year that I got the internship with Around the Horn, I literally got rejected from, I think it was 42 or 43 internships that I applied to before that. Just applied to a ton and just didn't get anything. Locally, dude, I was applying to local TV stations and getting rejected. And I was like, well, maybe I shouldn't do this, And for that matter, right before I got the digital role that I have with now FanDuel Sports Network, that was Bally Sports, that at the time was Fox Sports Florida. A lot of name changes. Right before I got that role, the year before I applied for it and didn't get it, and just had to keep following up with the guy who made the hires for it and tell him every few months, like, hey, still available. If you got anything, please. And also had to accept, okay, I didn't get it, but something else will come around. And I think that you really have to have kind of a positive mindset. You have to be willing to accept rejection. And there's this really funny thing for me where, man, I'm doing so much. I'm 29 years old, and I'm getting to do so much more than I ever anticipated in my 20s. Mm-hmm. And yet I have countless examples of rejection. Yeah. And so it's oh man, you must have just had this really straightforward, path to success because, wow, at 27, you're doing courtside reporting, whatever. And it's that's not really how it works. Yeah. There's a lot of right place, right time. And there's a lot of dealing with rejection and having to find a way to get through it. And without a genuine passion for sports and for storytelling that was, honed by my dad taking me to batting cages at 8 years old, and crafted by my newspaper teacher believing in me as a 16-year-old and making me a sports editor of our paper, and continuing into college, without all of those different people kind of supporting me and telling me no, you can do this, then maybe it doesn't happen. And so that's where I feel really lucky. So
what made you choose UCF? I mean, you got all these other universities in Florida, but is it just because close to home? Or,
no, it's a good question. Did
you want to go to UCF?
That's funny, right? So it's a funny story. So when I was going to Cypress Bay, I was unsurprisingly, based off everything about me, kind of a nerd, and taking a bunch of AP classes and all of that stuff, and all my friends were going off to all these different universities. And my dream school, bless you, my dream school from the time I was a little kid was University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. That was where I wanted to go. Absolute dream school, beautiful campus, the whole, everything. It's amazing. And it's a great journalism school. Mm-hmm. And so you guys might remember, but the college application process, you find out everything in the spring as where you're getting in, all of that stuff. And so for me, I had applied to a few different out-of-state schools, including North Carolina. And the only schools in Florida that I applied to I applied to UM, but and then UF and UCF. I didn't apply to FSU. I didn't want to go all the way to Tallahassee. And UCF was really because, as the dork that I was, the summer before my senior year, I went to a summer journalism camp at UF. That level of dorkdom, and real, a summer journalism camp where, no joke, guys, I was the coolest guy there because I organized a game of Gatorade Pong. That's cool. Think about life of the party. I'm saying, come on. So that's how lame all of it was. But on the way up, my mom was driving me up, and she was like, "Hey, rather than just going straight up to Gainesville, you've never seen any other college campuses. Why don't we stop in Orlando and check out UCF? And like the moment I stepped on the campus, I fell in love with it.
It's a nice campus.
It's beautiful. Like, it's amazing. I was blown away. Yeah. But as, you know, AP classes kid, UCF, especially at the time, didn't have that type of reputation academically.
Yep.
And it was kind of like, all right, it's my backup school. And as funny as it is, so I applied to all these different schools. I got in everywhere but Florida. So I got into North Carolina. I got into Miami. I get into all these schools, and I'm so excited. And Florida, like, I never really wanted to be a Gator. Like, I grew up in South Florida. Gator fans in South Florida suck. Like, the worst, like, somehow even more obnoxious than Miami fans in South Florida. Like, it's the worst. And so
can't be offended by that.
Yeah, it's just like, come on, man. Like, it's not. It's, you know. And so yeah, I just didn't grow up a Gator guy. But by default, I was like, that's the, you know, best school in Florida. That's where I'm going to go. And so I get into North Carolina, and the next week Florida's coming out, and I don't get it. I'm like, well, shit, what do I do now? Like, how's this going to work? And so it was just deciding between, okay, do I go to Carolina, which had been my dream school since I'm a little kid, and it's a great journalism program, and, you know, Stuart Scott went there, and like all these guys that are like these legends in sports journalism? Or do I go to UCF where, yeah, you know, I could be in the honors college or whatever, but I don't really know anything about it. Yeah. But the difference was, do I want to go $200,000 into debt, or do I want to go to school for basically free? And that decision made itself, you know? So it was like, as much as I wanted to go to Carolina, it was a dream. And I'll still always be like so proud of the work I did in high school to be able to even say that I could get in.
Yeah.
But to make the decision, like it was a no doubter. And then it couldn't have been a better decision for me. Like, I absolutely fell in love with the university. I met my now wife as a freshman in college there. It's the ultimate, like, man, you never know like what decisions are really going to impact your life. Yeah. And between having met my now wife, my brother ended up going to UCF as well. I got to become truly one of the most obnoxious college football fans in the country. It was great. It was perfect. Undefeated 2017 national champs, you know, the whole thing. So, yeah, man, I get to love all of it.
One of my good friends, Kazi, I think you know him. He played at UCF, and he killed me with that whole undefeated national championship.
Just because it's the truth? Come on.
Come on.
Should I go get my shirt? Should I go get that from
You're national champions, though.
Hey, man. Look, anybody else
going undefeated? And they put a sign up, too.
Anybody else going undefeated? Anybody else going undefeated that season?
Right.
Who did y'all play that year?
It beat LSU, I want to say.
It was that year, what it was. Yeah. I'll tell you what the real, like, the reason the claim ends up happening is because, and it was just a perfect storm, is that you end up as the only undefeated team, and then it was Bama and Georgia played each other in the national championship, right? Yeah. Bama wins. That's when Tua threw the touchdown coming in for Jalen Hurts. Yeah. Okay. But Auburn, who's the team we played in the bowl game and they beat both Bama and Georgia that year. So we were like, okay, the only chance that we had to play anyone was a team that beat both of the teams playing for your fake national championship. The ESPN College Football Invitational. And we're out here playing everybody on our schedule, winning all those games, and then beating Auburn. Hey, man, you can only play who's on your schedule. Yeah, if Notre Dame can claim a championship from 1925 or whatever, when there were like 4 teams, I think we can claim this one. So that was kind of the whole thing. And honestly, man, like, what an incredible, like, if we're being real, what an incredible decision by Danny White, the athletic director at the time, to do it. because like it's why you guys think about UCF. It's why anybody thinks about UCF. Yeah. We'd be a totally irrelevant brand if not for the fact that there was that claim. They went undefeated for 2 seasons. And it wouldn't have mattered if they didn't, after the first one, say, hey, we're national champs. Yeah. Like, no one would care.
Yeah. I think about UCF because of Blake Bortles.
Oh, my God.
That's really, honestly.
He put them on the map.
My God.
He put them on the map.
So, Blake Bortles, you got to understand, man, my freshman year was the Blake Bortles Fiesta Bowl year. So, for me, mind you, like, UCF was not, like, a relevant college football program before I went to school. And so I've got all my friends who are going off to UF and I'm feeling all like pissed off that they didn't let me in. And you know, they're the football program and whatever. And obviously FSU was good at the time, you know, Jameis is there and it's the whole thing. And I'm like, fuck, this is going to suck. Sorry for the language, but like, man, this sucks. Like, I don't know that we have a football program. Like I walk past the library and there's this cutout of this guy wearing number 5. And I'm like, who's he? And I Google it. I'm like, oh, Blake Bortles. Oh yeah. I think I've heard of him, whatever. And then we go 12-1 and win a Fiesta Bowl and the Gators go 4-8 and lose to Georgia Southern. And I'm like, well, this is the best thing that ever could have happened to me because I talked more shit than any human you could possibly imagine. And then, by the way, by the time I'm a junior, they're winless. We're 0-12 2 years later. And then the year after I graduate, they're undefeated national champs or whatever. So it was a roller coaster, but it's what made me so like into it because I'm like, all right, you introduced me as an 18-year-old to the ride of the Fiesta Bowl where they were winning, like they were losing every single one of those games in the fourth quarter and somehow pulling it off with Bortles. And then I'm at every single game as a junior, like sitting in the front row, devastated. We're losing to Furman in week 1, like 16-15 or whatever. And then by the time I graduate, you're now looking at the like most fun offense in the country and Scott Frost and the whole thing. So I'm so excited he's back. Like that'd be good. It's fun, man.
Who's the quarterback of that national football?
Mackenzie Milton.
Yeah, Mackenzie Milton.
Yeah, man.
Did he transfer or?
Yeah, what it was is he blew out his knee. So it was he had like they almost had to amputate his leg. Like it was horrible. It was horrible. And it was crazy because they had just like UCF had won 25 straight games. And then he blew out his knee and our backup quarterback, it was like, man, I'm so obsessed with it. It was a backup quarterback named DJ Mack. We were down by either 17 or 14 at the half in the conference championship game against Memphis. It was coached by Mike Norvell, who's now at FSU, right? And their running backs, which is crazy to look back at, the running backs on that team were Patrick Taylor, who's on the Niners now, Darrell Henderson and Tony Pollard.
Wow.
And they in that first half, they torched us on the ground. Like we're running all over us. And then for whatever reason, Mike Norvell starts in the second half is like, oh, we're going to start throwing the ball over the place. What are you doing? It was the dumbest decision ever. We came back and ended up winning the game. Like it was like 52-46 or something crazy like that. And then the first loss was to Joe Burrow, Justin Jefferson, and Jamar Chase of LSU as they started. Then the following year, they went undefeated and were like the best team ever. So I still think if Mackenzie Milton never had that injury, they might have just gone undefeated for like 3 straight years. Like, and no one would have cared. No one would have cared. It wouldn't have mattered. They wouldn't have gotten to the playoff. But I still think if that guy never got hurt, it could have been one of the most special things ever. But that's not why we're here. I feel like
Memphis team.
I just love it, man. They were loaded.
That Memphis team had a receiver too. What was his name, James?
Anthony Miller. He was with the Bears.
He was with the Bears. He was in college. He was cold.
Monster, dude. He was amazing.
He was cooking.
He had a couple
man.
Chicago too. He just I don't know what happened with him, but.
I mean, it was Chicago. That's what happened.
So, Jeremy, I got a question. Did you grow up a Heat fan, or I mean, because I'll say so. You did grow up a Heat fan.
Yeah,
so.
I did. No,
if you grew up an Orlando Magic fan, it's okay.
No, man, I'm South Florida through and through. So, I grew up a Heat fan, which is why, like, I feel like I have the coolest job in the world.
Got the coolest job.
It's awesome. I love it, and it's crazy because I mean, like, we're all kind of around the same age, and like Dwayne Wade is what made me a Heat fan. He gets
County,
yeah, man, for real. Like I was so lucky I got to be there for the statue unveiling, which was an experience for sure. But I know people were feeling a type of way about that statue. But it's crazy because like South Florida in so many ways is supposed to be a football town, and it is in that like we produce more football players than like anybody.
Yeah. You go on. Also, you heard it.
Yeah, but like it's true. Like it's just a fact of life. But
it's not. But we can continue.
It's fine. It's fine.
we can say that debate off camera.
I mean, at least look. It's not my school, but James did indeed. Look, comes from literally more pros than anybody out of that school right there.
First off,
don't give them that. They're Germ. They're cheating.
Thank you.
Germ. They'll have somebody at Cypress Bay.
Hey, trust me, man. I dealt with the same frustration. We had kids who were supposed to go to Cypress that went there.
All over the
yeah, they are recruiting.
Hate in your heart. Let it out.
It's not hate. It's the like Germ said. It's the truth.
Look, it is the truth a little bit.
NIL was a thing.
Hold on. On camera, James, what high school were you zoned for?
I was zoned for Western High School, but I went to St. Thomas.
Anybody can make their own decision to go to a private school like St. Thomas Aquinas and get their education somewhere different if that's what they want.
Hold on now.
Western, by the way, is at least a 20-minute drive from.
Listen. All y'all schools do it. Cypress Bay for sure has some kids.
So look, for what it's worth, I remember it's funny because just to show you like how different things are and how like we grow up and interpret things differently. I remember I found out when I was like, the sports editor of the newspaper, I was like, oh my God, there are kids that are not zoned for our school whose, parents dropped guardianship so that someone else could pick up guardianship and bring them to Cypress Bay. And I was like, I should write an expose about this, blah, blah, blah. And then I thought about it for like 3 days and I was like, why would I do that to these kids who are just here because they're trying to get to the right place, like educationally, football wise, all of it. Nonetheless, yes, going back to the Heat side of it, like for me growing up down here, I watched it because like it's sad, but as someone born in the mid 90s, the Dolphins have been mediocre my entire life.
Yeah,
my whole life. And so as a result, it's been hard to find that type of passion for the Dolphins, even someone who really loves watching football. Like it's clear based off of the way I talk about UCF that I have love in my heart to be able to love a football team. But they've been so mediocre, so irrelevant, so many years of Ryan Tannehill that I had to, as the Heat were so great and Dwayne Wade was this electric figure from the moment he entered the league to then, I'm 10, 11 years old and it's like, wait, what? We got Shaq now? Like, all right, cool. And they're going to go win a title. And then I'm in high school and it's the big three. And like to circle back, I remember, ironically, I was on the University of North Carolina campus the night the decision happened. I was there and I was at a bar, at a sports bar with my family called Top of the Hill, which is like their most touristy sports bar. And I remember my little brother who's 6 years younger than me. So I'm 14, he's 8. And there was no volume on. They were just playing music because nobody at this bar in North Carolina gave a shit about what LeBron was going to do. And so, but there's closed captioning and we're reading the closed captioning and it says like, I'm going to take my talents to, and it like stops there. And the next line says South Beach. And I like screamed at the top of my lungs and like ran across this restaurant and all these college kids are looking at me like, who's this asshole 14-year-old punk? And for the rest of the night, I'm like, we have LeBron James and Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh. Oh my God. And so, it immediately like it just becomes a passion. And so, man, I was on that show Hitting the Field at UCF. And I remember caring so deeply about the Dion Waiters, Goran Dragic, Rodney Magruder, Hassan Whiteside Heat teams that I remember I had like I used to start with like opening monologues, and they had won the second half of that season where they had started 10-30 and then went 30-10 or whatever it was. And I went on there and I said that Dion Waiters was the best player in Heat history with the initials DW, because I was just like going crazy on purpose. Like I was just giving hot takes and being ridiculous, but it was like just me trying to like show just how passionate I was about that team and do something silly because, 12 people were watching us or whatever. But it was more out of like, just to show you guys the way that I cared about it. Like I love the Heat. And so then, I graduated from college. My first job was at WSVN, which is local channel 7 down here, behind the scenes, and, not on camera, just behind the scenes, grinding away for, $12 an hour or whatever. And occasionally they'd be like, hey, do you want to go to, shoot around and just, you're not going to ask any questions, but do you want to just like go hold the microphone in the scrum? And I'm like, oh my God, you would let me do that around the Heat? Are you kidding? Like I was like, that's the coolest thing in the world. And so to watch that kind of be where I was at, to now get to be a courtside reporter for the team. This is my third year. It's like, I literally couldn't have dreamt it up. Like it's really, I feel so lucky to get to do what I do, and to combine that with like the Dan Le Batard show, where like Dan's been the guy down here my whole life, so it's pretty crazy to get to like work with someone who I looked up to in that respect, and then be on a broadcast with the people I've been listening to and watching on broadcast my whole life. Like game 1 with the Heat, I remember I had the IFB in, and I'm sitting there, I'm watching the game, and I hear Eric Reed in my headphones, and then we go to commercial, and then one of the producers gets in my ear and like, hey Jeremy, we're gonna go to your story after this break. And I had legitimately forgotten I wasn't just like watching the game on TV. That's crazy. Right, I'm on this broadcast. Whoa. And it's just like, it still kind of feels that way. So yeah, man, I'm a super lucky guy.
But talk about that process too, like moving back home and then getting that call that like, or applying for jobs and, applying for that Heat job and getting that call, like, Jeremy, you on, like, how did that feel, the excitement? What was the process like?
Yeah, it's a cool kind of path and process because, I when I graduated from UCF, right? So I told you, I have this show, and I'm like, man, I can do anything. I'm hosting the show. I'm producing the show. I've got this great reel that I've put together. All of my professors are telling me like, man, you crushed it. Good job, blah, blah, blah. And then just like all those internships I was telling you guys about before, I must have applied to like 50 jobs. Didn't get one, not a call, like nothing. And maybe I was setting my sights too high. Like admittedly, I'm applying for all these national things and thinking that it's going to work, and that's not how it works. And so, man, I came home and was just straight up unemployed for the first 3 or 4 months that I was down here, just like revamping my reel, revamping my resume, putting out feelers, all those things. And when I first got the job at WSVN, I told myself like 6 months and you're out of here. Like, I don't want to be here working behind the scenes for however much for that long. Like, I want to be the guy. I want to be on camera. And everyone, told me, and this is the path that a lot of people take. It's like, okay, work behind the scenes there and then get a job on air in like Wausau, Wisconsin as like the weekend, you know what I mean? Like go be like the weekend sports anchor at this like, market 140 in the country. And then work your way to the mid-size market. And then maybe if you're lucky, you can get to a big market, but it's not going to be, where you grew up. And so I kind of looked at it and was like, well, I don't want to do that. So I'm going to try to be patient and find the right gig for me when the time comes. So did I apply to a couple of those and have interviews and stuff? Yeah. And then every time it got serious, I would like back away and be like, actually, I don't really want this job. And it was about 2 years in, when this role of digital host and reporter with then Fox Sports Florida became a job. Like, it became a thing that they were kind of implementing, and I applied for it. And what I came to find out is it came down to me and one other person, and she got it. I didn't. And I was crushed, man. I was like, what am I going to do? And so, no joke, I was like, that was in September of 2019. So, mind you, the woman that I met as a freshman in college in 2013, we've now dated all the way through this time. She's living in Orlando, working at her job, which at the time was a fully in-person job. And things have changed since then, COVID and everything like that. But she's working in person. She's killing it at her job. I'm like floundering, wondering what the heck I'm going to do. And so I'm trying to find jobs in Orlando. And the sports market there is not what it is down here. So I'm not finding jobs. And then COVID happens. And I'm like, shit, like, what am I going to do? Like, maybe this is the time. I always thought being like a high school teacher who coached baseball would be super cool. I really like history. I like journalism. Maybe I could teach a combo of those classes. Like, I'd feel fulfilled. I could mold young minds. Like, maybe I'll go do that. Let me give it a few more months, And basically what happened was in October of 2020, my now wife decided to move down here because I had started to gain a little bit of momentum of like networking, and I was co-hosting like this Marlins podcast that was doing okay, and her work went remote because of COVID. It's stayed remote, which for us was like in a horrible time, a wonderful silver lining for us, and so she got to move down, keep her job. I got to keep going for it, and now a year later, like literally exactly a year later from when I had been rejected from the job initially, I was moving out to Fort Lauderdale, literally walking distance from the studios where Bally was at. And I just reached back out and was like, hey, I don't know if you guys have anything behind the scenes. I just need like a change of pace, whatever. And again, an odd little silver lining, but because COVID had messed up everything with the sports calendar, the woman who had taken the job before me like really, really struggled, and not like from their boss's perspective, but from her own. She was like, this is miserable. Like, how am I supposed to do this digital job when there's no sports going on? Yeah. And so she just kind of quit on the whole business, and they shook hands and parted ways. Mm-hmm. And so all of a sudden I've moved out there. My wife is now down here, and this job is open. And he's like, you know what, man? Like, and he was honest. He was like, I kind of like wanted to bring you in from the beginning. I think you could launch a podcast for us and do some digital stuff. I know the podcasting work that you're doing. Would you be interested? I was like, would I be interested, man? I'm working for $12 an hour in this like supply closet editing video. Like, of course, man. And so it was really like overnight, just like that. Like that was October. By January 1st, I've got a contract with then Fox Sports Florida. By July of that year, we're working on launching a podcast. I've done 160 some odd episodes since then, like once a week. And it was crazy, man. Like all of a sudden I'm now working for this network, and it's just like, it's kind of that simple where you just kind of have to just keep doing the work. And, just like anything else, like no matter what's going on, if you keep working as hard as you can, if you keep trying to hone your craft as well as you can, whether there are 3 people listening or 3 million people listening, like you just have to do it. And that's kind of the advice that, whenever I have like high school or college kids, we're like, oh man, how do I get to do what you're doing? The opportunity to do that now is better than ever. And I just tell them like, look, you've got to work super hard. You have to be good at it, but also you have to get lucky. Like you have to be in the right place at the right time. And, but I also tell them like, look, if you want to, like, if you have an idea for a podcast, just do it. I don't care if it's just your parents listening to it, because the reps, like, you can put it on your resume or whatever, but just the reps, the repetition of doing the job is really the most important thing, so that way, once you're put in position to do it, you know what you're doing. My first game courtside with the Heat was quite literally the first time I ever did courtside reporting in a live game ever. Like ever. Like I never, it was kind of insane. Like they probably shouldn't have hired me. Like it's really ridiculous. Like when you really think about it, it's kind of nuts. But it was like, that was the first time. Like it wasn't high school, it wasn't college. I had never done it before. But because I had like studied the craft enough and I had done enough, whether it was podcasting, whether it was recording my own stand-ups when they would send me as a producer, like, hey, just go hold that microphone at Heat practice. I was lucky that our videographer was a super wonderful and kind man named Pete Hoffner. But I would go to him and be like, hey, Pete, can we pretend that I'm doing a report from here and you just film me and let me have that? And so I can use the microphone, feel what it feels like to do one of these reports. And the answer was always yes. And it's like between networking and just doing the job as much as you can, even if it's if you want to be a play-by-play guy, watch a game, turn off the volume, do the play-by-play.
Start talking.
Just start talking. Like that's the job. And yeah, I mean, that was kind of the path for me, was just kind of, accepting rejection where it was, being patient, and then a little bit of right place, right time. And obviously, like, it took a lot of hard work. I'm not discounting the amount of work that it took, but I also know how fortunate I am to have ended up in the position that I did. And so to end up with the Heat, like, I got the digital role. I did that for a while. I continued to do it. And then I saw that this position was going to be open because the woman who was doing 25 games a year was stepping away. I reached out to my bosses and they said, hey, actually the Heat already had you on some sort of short list they gave us. And I was like, how is that possible? Why? Why would they do that? Like, that's crazy. And so, yeah, I along with, I don't know how many people, probably 10 to 15 people, went in and like auditioned for it, essentially, where they had us I had to talk to them about like my strengths and weaknesses and, what I thought I could bring to the role. And then they had us do kind of like a mock version of the broadcast. So I sat there and it was like, hey, I mean, you guys have watched enough Heat games. It's like Ron Rothstein at the half. And so it's not Ron, but they're like, hey, this is what the score is. This is who the leading scorer is. This is how many turnovers each team has. Bring us into a halftime segment with Ron. All right. Crazy. Then it's, hey, and I remember the specific one that it was, is they gave me Caleb Martin's stat line from his like breakout game against the Milwaukee Bucks where he had 28 points and it was like a huge deal. He was still on a 2-way contract. And they were like, hey, you've got Caleb Martin in the winner's circle. He just dropped 28 points, 9 rebounds, go. I'm like, okay. And, just had to kind of fake an interview. And, I prepared a lot for it. It didn't hurt that I watched every game anyway, because I loved the team, and it put me in a pretty good position. And so, yeah, I got a call like a few weeks later that was, hey, you're going to be a part of this broadcast team. And that was right before the season. I mean, it was like literally like a week before the preseason. And then all of a sudden I was on the broadcast team. Like, what? Well, it was crazy. My first year, they go from an 8 seed all the way to the title. And I was like, this is the greatest thing. This is how this works. This is what my life's going to be. Are you kidding? This is the coolest. So, yeah, man, it's just been a wild ride ever since.
Yeah, we got to talk some current NBA.
Let's do it.
I think it was like maybe a week or two ago. Jimmy Butler, there's some rumors that, he was looking for a change of scenery. Then his agent, comes out and has a little back and forth with Shams, however he says it.
Yeah.
You think there's a chance Jimmy actually does get traded, or you believe he's happy there, in Miami?
I think the answer is yes to both of the things that you said. I think it's complicated because I believe that Jimmy Butler wants to be in Miami for the rest of his career. Mm-hmm. I believe that the Miami Heat would like to have Jimmy Butler play for the Miami Heat for the rest of his career. I think that that's what both teams or both sides of this want. I think that it is fair to question whether or not that will actually be the case.
Yeah.
When these types of reports come out, they don't come from nowhere.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
At the same time, what I will say is at the same time, sometimes information can be true and also not as recent as the report.
Yeah, I guess
so what I would say is, like, we heard Houston, Golden State, even we hadn't really heard Phoenix, but Houston, Golden State. Who was the third team that he mentioned? It was Houston, Golden State, and there was another one, and I'm forgetting it at the moment.
I want to, because I was watching ESPN. I was watching NBA today. I think it was Phoenix.
Yeah, Phoenix is the one now, but there was one other in that initial. There was one other in that initial report. It doesn't matter, nonetheless.
He's going to go to a winner.
All the teams that were brought up, all the teams that were brought up, we had already kind of heard over the summer when it was, hey, Jimmy wants a contract extension. Oh, well, the Heat don't want to give him a contract extension. Where could he be traded? Oh, here are the teams he could be traded to. We kind of already did all of that. And so, in a sense, that initial Shams report kind of felt like a repackaging of that information with one update, which is Phoenix is another team that is interested in him and that he wouldn't mind being traded to. But I also think that there's like always an interesting dynamic in those types of reports in terms of the specific language. It was not Jimmy Butler wants to be traded and this is where he wants to go. Like, for example, it was with Damian Lillard, where it was, hey, Dame wants out and he wants to go to Miami. That's not what happened. Sadly,
I wish it happened.
Although flip side, Tyler looks damn good, man.
Yeah.
But nonetheless,
about him.
He's been great.
So, what you gonna say?
We'll get there. I'm gonna ask him.
We'll get there. Yeah, we'll get there on Tyler. But what I would say is, saying not he wants out and he wants to go to those places, but if he were traded, these are the places he'd prefer. And then not the Heat are shopping Jimmy Butler. The Heat are listening to offers on Jimmy Butler. Those are two different things. Yeah. So I think that, yes, it gives us something to talk about. Yes, he very well could get traded by the deadline. But I don't believe that he, at least at the moment, based off like the vibes around the locker room, like it's such a shame because things have, like, this is the best things, like after the win against Cleveland on Sunday, that's like the best that locker room has felt since like real early last season. Like it's been a while since it felt that way in that room. And for this all to come out right after that was such a shame because team's been playing pretty well. I know they just lost to Detroit. That was a disappointing loss, particularly after the comeback to get there. Yeah. But the team's actually been playing pretty good basketball. And so I don't believe that there will be a trade unless the Heat get to a point this season where, whether it's through injuries or inconsistent play, that they're just like, we're not making a run, even with Jimmy. Yeah. And so in turn, let's capitalize and get the right move back. But I look at it and I go, the guy either is going to opt out this offseason, in which the Brooklyn Nets are like the only team that could sign him outright, and he wants to win and they're bad. So
going there.
Probably not going there. And so if he wants like the big max deal, that means some version of a sign-in trade, which at least the Heat would still be getting some assets back and then could still play out the rest of the season. Or he opts in to the final year of his deal and asks to be traded, in which case you got to play out the rest of this year and you're in the exact same position as you would be at this deadline. So to me, I see the Heat in a position of, look, Jimmy, we love you. You love us. We all butt heads, but that's the type of competitors all these maniacs are. Yep. And ultimately, if it's the right move for kind of both parties, something could happen. But I'm not in this state of like, oh my God, Jimmy's definitely going to be traded and he's gone for sure and all of that. There's so much basketball to be played. There's so much more time ahead of us that at the moment, like if look, now I'm going to look like an idiot. You guys will be able to clip this and play it in a week. But like, if he got traded next week, I would be absolutely floored.
Yeah, I would be.
Yeah.
You gonna fire up about Tyler Hero? I know you.
Oh no, I mean, and my question was just more so like, as a Heat fan, right? Me and James and yourself, we've got to live through those glory days of, D Wade, Wade County, way before, the big three down here in Miami and the moves we had to make to get to that championship status. Now we have been making it, but do you have any frustration with the front office of, I guess, not making trades or not making moves in the offseason to better our team? Because let's be real, I think for the past year since we lost Whiteside, the center position, although Bam has been playing at an amazing level, we've always missed that size at the 5 spot.
Yeah.
And it just seems like we don't go and it seems like we just haven't gone and got somebody that can fill the spot. So how do you feel about it?
It's totally fair. It's totally fair to have your concerns about that spot. For that matter, I know Bam would prefer to play the 4. Like if he had his wits about him, he'd much rather, specifically at this point. It's part of why they drafted Khalil Ware, because I think their hope is that in the future they can move Bam to the 4 and play Khalil Ware alongside him as someone that can stretch the floor. He's just super raw and young still at the moment to be able to get that type of consistent run. I think that there are fair criticisms to be made about the moves within the margins for the Miami Heat. I think it's fair to say after the Jay Crowder, Andre Iguodala move that they made in 2020, they have not made another move akin to that one that is like a needle mover in a given season. The flip side to that would be, not only did they get Jimmy Butler from nothing, but they've drafted and developed now both Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero. They've turned several undrafted players into multimillionaires, and had the foresight to not sign those guys. Remember, the big issue with the build before was they gave all the money to Hassan Whiteside after they took him from nothing, built him into something, and then gave him a ton of money and he sucked. And they did the same thing. I mean, let's just be real. He was awful after that. And it's not like he was who he was. It was their mistake giving him that money. But they did it to him. They gave it to Kelly Olynyk. They gave it to Dion Waiters. They gave it to James Johnson. They fell in love with these guys that were not superstars and paid them enough money that it handicapped them moving forward. Where, look, ironically, probably the 3 guys I've gotten along with best in my time working for the Heat are Gabe Vincent, Max Strus, and Caleb Martin. I love those guys. Yeah. But the Heat let them all go. They didn't fall in love with these guys that they created. And now what are they doing? They're doing the same thing. Pelo Larson's going to be another one of these second-round picks that becomes a dude. Haywood Highsmith is a second-round pick that's become a starter for them. Duncan Robinson's still there, elite shooter. They've been able to do this within the margins as they have these other guys who were max players. And the greatest criticism has been, hey, how did you not get Jimmy another guy? How did you not get him another offensive weapon in this run? The real question becomes, who was that ever actually going to be? Yeah. Because everybody wanted the Heat to trade, not Tyler Hero, they wanted the Heat to trade Bam Adebayo for Bradley Beal. I think the Heat might have made the right move. Yeah. They wanted to trade Tyler for James Harden. Would that have worked along Jimmy? They wanted everybody to trade Tyler and pieces for Damian Lillard. And while that would have worked, and I believe it would have been a great move, they just kind of got screwed by Portland's general manager throwing a pissy fit. That's just what happened. And so they might have mismanaged that one. I don't really know what went down behind the scenes in terms of who actually made the first and last call there. But it seems like they kind of just got screwed because Portland was so mad that Dame said, I only want Miami. And when you look back at a whole bunch of the times where everyone said, trade Tyler and all these pieces right now for this guy. When you look back at a lot of that, and you look at the player Tyler Hero has now become, and you look at the runs that the Heat made in those years, look, maybe if they had traded Tyler Hero before the year that they ended up the 8 seed that made the run to the finals, and Tyler had been a different guy, they win. Or maybe if Tyler just doesn't get hurt, they win. You know, like he just wasn't there. And so I have a hard time looking back at a lot of those and really questioning their move and not cashing in, because oftentimes the player available wasn't the right move. Like if they could have gone and actually acquired Kevin Durant via trade, they would have done it. You know, like they would have cashed in everything but Bam and Jimmy to go get Kevin Durant. But he was never available to them in the way that they needed it. He ended up being a free agent. He ended up being moved for 1,000 draft picks that they didn't have, you know? And why don't they sometimes have those assets? Because they're always trying to compete. You know, those are the rumors coming out about the trades right now, which is like a trade that makes a ton of sense would be to, like, if you're going to trade Jimmy, would be to trade him to Houston, get like 2 or 3 first round picks and a couple of their young players and call it a day, because then you can go into this offseason, have all those young guys that either you decide to build around as your full core, or you ship them and those picks back out to get another star, blah, blah, blah. But the Heat won't even punt on like half a season. Like they refuse to even do that. So they're like, no, we need the best players we can get right now, because that's just who they are. Like that's literally what Heat culture is all about, is like, we're not going to concede anything. It's part of why I think Jimmy's going to be here all the way through the year, because I think they're going to look at themselves and go, hey, so what? We're a 4 or 5, 6 seed. If they're not a play-in team, like if they think they can be a playoff team and say, what, we got to go win 4 out of 7 games? We can do that against anybody. And it's funny, like the Heat are a team, they have been this entire Jimmy Butler era that's like, outside of the 1 year they were the 1 seed, they've basically been about a 500 team in the regular season. But you know what the funny part about the playoffs is? All you got to do is go 1 game over 500 over 7 games 4 times. Like it's really that simple. You got to win 4 out of 7 games 4 times. That's how the Heat have done it. The Celtics do it by winning every single game. Like they've gone crazy. They dominate. But the way that the Heat literally got to the finals and got to 2 other Eastern Conference finals, got to the finals twice and got to another Eastern Conference finals, almost none of those series were like wins in 5 games. It was all 6 or 7, because that's what they got to do. They just adjust game by game. And sometimes they'll win a game by 3 and then lose by 35 and then win the next game by 5. And it doesn't matter, because you just got to win those individual games. And I think that's kind of their mentality. So I don't think, I wouldn't give them like an A+++ for this entire regime. Like that would just be biased and like not looking at the reality of it. I definitely think that there's like moves they could have made. But I also like, it's the Tyler discussion in particular that's a funny one. Because the dude's 24 years old, man. He's 24. Sure. And his best ball too. He's playing out of his mind. And it's just so funny because why? Because it's the first year of his entire career where he didn't spend the entire offseason thinking he was going to be traded somewhere else. It's kind of that simple. Yeah. He actually just got to prepare for the season.
You talked about the Dame trade, and if they were able to actually get Dame, Tyler Hero probably was going to be the one that was.
Oh yeah,
I mean, I would have been all for that just because of the caliber of player that Dame is.
I was at the moment too, by the way. Like I get it,
and I think my issue with T Hero and even just some of the younger guys when it comes to trading is, with the years that we had Jimmy, it seemed like we got to the finals or we got to the conference championship, and we didn't have that next superstar that was going to be able to kind of, Batman and Robin with him to get us over the hump. I just think at the time, just wanting to win now, right? Totally. You would say the piece that was young that you would have to move would be T Hero.
It was going to be. He would have been if the right move was there. I just think that they never found the right trade partner for the right piece. In their view. by the way. That doesn't mean that it's right. I'm just saying from their view, they never found the right guy at the right piece. And what's so funny about all of it, right, is like, if Goran Dragic and Bam Adebayo don't both get like pretty severely injured in the 2020 finals, they beat the Lakers, and we're not, and none of us are having this conversation. Like they would have just beat the Lakers, and they like Jimmy would have gotten his ring, and we'd be having a different conversation. And by the way, the other time they went to the finals, they went up against maybe the greatest player I've ever seen in Nikola Jokic. Like that dude, I've never seen anything like him in my life, what he does on a basketball floor. So it's like, okay, you know, they went up against LeBron, maybe the greatest player ever, and Jokic, maybe the greatest player ever. And they lost to the Celtics that went on to be one of the most dominant teams we've ever seen. So it's like it happens sometimes that way. And, you know, maybe this era of Miami Heat basketball will be remembered sort of like the bad boy Pistons are, where it's like the second in a group, the team that the Celtics had to beat to get there before they started winning a ton of titles.
Having a number, man.
You know, like we had it. And for that matter, I can tell you right now, to a man in that locker room, the Heat look at it as, hey, we've won 2 out of 3 of those battles. And the one that we lost, we were a inch away from Jimmy hitting a game-winning 3 and going to the finals that year too. Because their view of it is, hey, Jimmy wasn't healthy last year. Neither was Terry. Like neither was Duncan. Nobody was in that series. That one they're not looking at as like the same even strength. So their view is, hey, in this whole run, even strength, they've still got to show us that they can beat us even with these guys. And that might be, it might be crazy. Like maybe it is, right? The Celtics are so dominant. They're so good. They're so talented. They're so deep. Peyton Pritchard is like, what's he doing? That's crazy. Like, what do you mean Peyton Pritchard is shooting like 90% from 3? It's insane. Yeah. But at the same time, you know, I think that these guys have that sort of warrior mentality. And who knows? Maybe it all falls apart. Maybe the personalities finally start to rub each other the wrong way. Jimmy, look, I love watching Jimmy Butler play basketball. I actually find him to be a really fascinating character inside the locker room. But I also could see that, like, if he wants to bother everyone, it wouldn't take much. Like, he could just flip a little tiny bit of his personality and really start to rub people the wrong way. And
so the Timberwolves on us.
They know about that interview. That's the first thing that popped in my mind.
That's what I'm saying. So, like, if he really want that, but isn't that kind of like, doesn't that kind of show you a little bit of where things actually are right now? Like, if Jimmy Butler wants to make a stink, he makes a stink. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not just like, oh, you know, I'm fine, I'm not going to talk about it. The most trolling he's doing right now is changing the color of his hair to whatever team everybody's rumored, which is hilarious, by the way. Like,
red,
that's
white,
so funny. Like, that's hilarious. The fact that he went, like, Twitter went, oh man, he better not have orange hair tomorrow, and then he had orange hair is crazy. Like, that's so funny. But yeah, man, it's nuts, but it's a fun team to get to cover.
Sure. If Tyler keep hooping like that, though, I'm man enough to take it back.
All right,
he got to do a couple playoffs.
Not just the play.
That's the thing, man.
You quit, Warren. You has been a hoop in what? April and May, whenever it is.
Hey, man, that's been his biggest issue. Is, you know, it's funny because he was playing so, like, everybody forgets.
Last year, right?
So, like, last year, he played great in that postseason against Boston without anybody around him. And everybody forgets that, dude, he was playing the best basketball of his career going into that postseason where the Heat were the 8th seed. And he just happened to break his hand in that game. And then that was it. And it was such a shame because that was going to, theoretically, that was going to be the moment where he got to show everyone, like, yeah, no, I can do it here too. You know, he did it as a rookie in the bubble, but that's different. It's a totally different animal. He was a rookie. Scouting was different. The bubble clearly was a different thing.
Everybody playing different in there.
Yeah, everybody. Man. But that next year was even crazier because it was like, you look back at it, what's so funny is everybody did like the bubble fraud thing, but it's like, dude, the Bucks and the Suns with Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton, those were the teams in the finals the next year. Turns out that was kind of more of the fluke because the Heat kept going back to the Eastern Conference Finals, and the Lakers kept being competitive, and the Nuggets, who were also in that conference finals, they kept getting better. It seems more like the year after, where they only had that 6-week turnaround before the next season started, was really the year where it was more of a fluke, where the Hawks are going to the conference finals and, the Bucks are going to the fight. It's because all those teams that were rested from having lost early in the playoffs the year before. So it's been a fascinating few years of basketball, and that's why I'm super lucky to have been around the Heat for a few of them here.
Before we wrap, got to ask you, NBA viewership is down, what people are saying, and what are your thoughts on that and the NBA Cup? Do you think that's a thing that needs to stay, or is it something that's just whatever?
Yeah, it's funny. I kind of like it. I do think it's cool. I do think that I think that the biggest issue that the NBA actually has, weirdly, is more of a marketing issue than a product issue, because basketball is great, man. Basketball is really good right now. It's competitive. No team is ever out of it in any game. You could be down 20 with 6 minutes left and still have a chance because of the 3-ball. And that's actually kind of fun. That Detroit game, the Detroit game's a perfect example. They were getting their asses kicked all night against a team that was pretty mediocre. And it was so funny. There was 10 minutes left in the game. The Heat are down, 18 or 20 or whatever. And my wife walked into the room. She said, "Why are you still watching this?" I'm like, "I don't know. I'll turn it off in a couple minutes. I'm ready to go to bed." And then, of course, it's all right, the Heat go on a 9-0 run in 40 seconds. And it's oh, well, all right, I guess they're back in the game. And that's great for basketball right now. Players are more skilled than they've ever been. Offensive sets are great. Basketball is awesome.
Fast paced.
And it's fast paced and it's crazy. And that should be a good thing. Think about how great it's been for the NFL that defense is just not what it was at all. At all. And yet for the NFL, that's being viewed as a positive thing. Where in basketball, shouldn't it be a good thing that teams are scoring more? Shouldn't we be excited that that's the case? But for whatever reason, we've people have convinced themselves that it's not as aesthetically pleasing. And look, watching the Washington Wizards take 53s in a game and hit 6 of them, that sucks. You're right, that sucks. Sometimes there are stinkers when you're doing it this way. But the flip side would be when you're watching good basketball right now, to me, it's as good as it gets. And I think that the NBA has a really interesting case on its hands of how do we remind the viewer that that's the case. I think that from a marketing perspective, they had Magic and Bird, and then they walked right into Jordan, and then Jordan led into LeBron. Yeah. And Kobe was there as the bridge between Jordan and LeBron and there for both of their careers. And now
KD,
it was KD
Bryce.
and Steph and Bryce. But it's
not Bryce, Bronny.
Yeah, I like the idea. It's Bryce though. It's gonna be Bryce. Bronny's not gonna be the one. And so poor guy. It was fat. It kind of sucks. It kind of sucks to watch people. It's great. That dude's got an awesome life, and he's gonna be fine. But it's not fun to watch everyone in the world shit on you on the internet. It's not fun.
No, it's not.
It's just not cool. To have to deal with. But I think that what's almost interesting is I anticipated, and we all did, that there would be a time where LeBron would retire and Steph and KD, and at the time, Russell Westbrook and James Harden and all those guys would kind of step up and fill that void and become the next superstars, which would lead to the next group. But there's this weird thing that happened, which is that LeBron is still playing. And so what's happened is LeBron and Steph and KD and Harden, they're all going to go out within 2 or 3 years of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And the next wave of superstars are amazing. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is such an incredible basketball player.
Yeah.
But between him and Giannis and Jokic and dude, Anthony Edwards,
Wemby.
yeah, man, Wemby.
It's
think about it. But think about what I just named, right? we just named 5 guys, right? 4 of them are not from the United States.
Yeah.
And that's the space that basketball is in that's really interesting, because what it is really a lot of people who watch basketball are not connecting to these guys who are from Serbia and France and Canada. Shea's Canadian and you look around and Giannis, who's Greek, that does matter. You need to find a way to tell these guys stories to make them as accessible as LeBron's story was, or Kobe's story was, or D Wade's story was, or all of these other guys that we watched. And when the college basketball game is all but gone in terms of accessibility, and you have this influx of players who we haven't been watching since they were kids, Zion would have been Zion, for that matter, Ja getting in the trouble that he got in, and Zion not really panning out, at least at the moment, really hurt them, because those 2 guys, Ja in terms of his electricity and Zion in terms of his fame, we all knew him since he was 15, putting videos on Instagram. And those guys were gonna be oh my God, they're gonna be the next faces, and Ja's still getting there, but those guys didn't really capture that moment. And so I think they're in this really fascinating space as a league of trying to figure out who are we supposed to embrace when this LeBron, Steph, KD era comes to an end.
But I wanted to ask you that, because I feel like Ant-Man is the perfect example of that. He's the guy, right? But I think so much of the not media trained, he go on TV, he'll say
that's what we love about him,
and we love it, right? But I think that's scared of NBA away. Who between him and Ja, right? How do you think?
Oh, I think they like Anthony Edwards more, for sure. In terms of, because look at what he did. The Adidas commercial that he did was incredible. Incredible. And he is one of the guys that I think they genuinely would love to be a superstar.
Yeah.
I think the reality is that at the moment, he's actually more of a star than his game even really warrants. He's not as good as Shea. He's not, but he's great. He's a great defender, and he's a great competitor.
Yeah.
He's, when you talk about the Mamba mentality and stuff like that, this dude has it. He believes he could beat anybody on any given day. And that's the coolest to watch. That's one of the best things to be able to watch, is put a basketball on a court and watch me go to work. And it's amazing. That series was unreal. And watching him, the NBA loved that he was doing that. And I think they hope that he will. But right now he's on a Minnesota team that's just okay.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that the NBA needs these guys to be LA, New York, but it doesn't need to be that.
Yeah.
If I can also say something, Jason Tatum's just one of the most boring superstars that's ever existed.
Yeah,
he's just boring. It is what it is. It's not even his fault. He's just born in a lab to play basketball, But it's at least Kawhi was so quiet that it was interesting. Jason Tatum is just kind of boring. And he seems like a super nice guy. It's nothing against him or his game. He's unbelievably smooth. Yeah. But it's his game kind of has no flaws, and his personality is just oh man, I've got this cute little kid and I'm nice, and that's it, It's and as a result, if that guy's winning, that guy's winning the title, there's not a lot to really build around him. Yeah. That guy won an NBA title and then went to the Olympics, and everyone was boo, we don't want him to play somebody else. That's crazy. That's not how that goes normally. And so I just think that the combination of they need Anthony Edwards to win something, or they need Ja to win something, or they need Zion to kind of come back and be the type of guy they think he can be. But until then, they've got to find a way to make Giannis and Jokic and Wemby. Wemby is talk about another, maybe that's the best guy who's ever played basketball. Yeah. Oh my God, what he does on the floor. It doesn't even make sense. It doesn't make physical human sense. I don't get it. and it's crazy, and he's going to break the league. And they need to figure out a way to like show people, hey, this is like as cool as it gets in sports. And I don't think they're doing a horrible job of it, but I think that when you talk about like viewership and stuff, it's like, look, we also 20 years ago, MJ retires and it's like, oh man, viewership's down. And it's like, I think things went okay during the LeBron era. I think they're all right. Yeah. So I'm not going to panic about it. I think like TV viewership in general is in a weird space. And so counting all of it, like, I don't even know how we really calculate these things anymore. Mm-hmm. So much of it is about the content that you build around it too. Like I love that they did the Netflix documentary that they did. I think that was really smart. And so, we'll see. Maybe it ultimately takes, like, as weird as it sounds, like maybe it just takes the right like TikTok storytellers to like show people the stories behind some of these guys to get people to fall in love with them, because not everybody's watching the pregame show for a game on Tuesday night on TNT, so you need to find a way to package it and get it to young people on social media.
Yeah, that is very true, man. Well, we appreciate you, Jeremy, for taking time out to kick it with us. It was a dope episode.
Oh, thank you guys.
Yes, sir.
This is great.
And that's a wrap for this Money Down podcast on the Believe Network, presented by BetOnline.ag. Keep liking, keep subscribing, keep showing love.